Best program in college football, Alabama fans, what do you think? Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, with our first ever Clemson Tigers live, going an hour with these two gentlemen. Up at the top there, we got Brian Knight, a.k.a. Bobby Durkins, right here on YouTube. So please join his Clemson channel right there. And also, of course, Pigskin Pete. Brian, first of all, how are you doing? Because I think Pigskin probably has to mull over how he's doing before he's going to be able to respond. So we'll ask you first, Brian.
It's not like he has some type of answer that he always says at the beginning of every show.
No.
That
He's got to think about it.
Well, yeah. What is it? Is this Pigskin Pete roast night? Come on now.
No.
We didn't tell you?
I haven't brought out ex-girlfriends yet. No, I'm doing great. I'm glad to be on the show. Glad to see you. Glad to see my buddy down in the lower part of the state. It's great to see all y'all.
And Pigskin?
I'm terrible and horrible. Thank you.
You know, people are going to be jumping off bridges and if they actually hear that.
All right. I'm amazing and fantastic.
Okay.
Thanks for asking.
There are Clemson fans out there that depend on you.
They do. They do. And if they depend on me, then their life is completely lost. But
oh, this is going to be a whole lot of fun. We got Brian, we got Pigskin Pete, and we're going to talk Clemson football for the next hour. And of course, we're going to take your comments and questions as well. So I got to think, Pigskin, that championship game hurt, but it didn't hurt anywhere close to what it would have been 3 or 4 years ago before 2 rings.
Yes, so the championship game did not hurt that much. I know people want it to hurt. Both the Clemson haters and the Pigskin Pete haters want it to hurt much more than it really did. To me, if you would have told me 10 years ago, especially 15, 20 years ago, that Clemson would be in a position where they're playing in playoffs every year, of course, even before the playoffs even happened, but certainly once the playoffs have been a normal thing, and that their season or their hopes of their season hinges on winning a national title every year, I would have given myself over to Satan himself. And so, no, it didn't hurt that much. LSU was the best team in the country, without a doubt, this past season. But the fact that Clemson's there every year in the past 4 or 5 years, and the fact that Clemson looks to me as if they're not slowing down. We could talk about the recruiting and everything else that's going on with Clemson right now. I am extremely optimistic, to say the least, about the future of Clemson football, and I couldn't be happier.
Nobody's perfect, Brian, but if there is a perfect program, this would be it.
I mean, obviously, I'm dressed in the loud orange pullover with a tiger paw on his shirt. Of course, biased or not, I'll have to tell you that, like he said, I mean, I've come on your show, I've talked about it. On my show, I've talked about it. On his show, I've talked about it. I've went on other people's boards and talked about it. I mean, 2005, we lost a total of 4 games by a total of 14 points. This was the same program who 1 week went down to Coral Gables and beat, number 3 Miami, and the very next week somehow mustered just enough strength to go up to Duke and lose in overtime on a last-second field goal. If you're a real Clemson fan, and you've been a Clemson fan for a while, this is a big deal. What is going on? Would I love to have the national championship? Yeah, of course. That game is over. It's done. Our team is not. And they're just continuing to build, recruiting, the players who ETN saying, I'm coming back. Man, that shocked the college football world. He's coming back. So, man, I'm so proud of my team. I'm proud of the state of our program. And I'm just excited to see what's coming up in this 2020 season.
And that's the difference between LSU and Clemson, and not to in any way diminish what LSU accomplished. But if we said over the next 3 or 4 years, LSU's records are going to be 9-3, 10-2, 10-2, 9-3, we would say, okay, nobody would probably even question that. If we said over the next 3 or 4 years, Clemson after this championship game is going to go 9-3, 10-2, 10-2, 9-3, what happened? What happened? there's that much confidence in this program that it just continues to roll and roll and roll and roll. And no, you're not going to win every national championship, but to be right there at the brink and competing for one every season since 2015, we're talking about 5 straight seasons. That's crazy.
It is. And I don't know how excited you are, Bobby. I haven't spoke to Bobby for a few days now, and that's a long time for us. Us Clemson fans, we talk on the phone every day. But the 2021 season has just been announced that we are playing Georgia to open the season in Charlotte.
Love it.
And I love it too. I'm going to be there. I don't know if you guys are going to be there. Well, I don't know if I know Mark won't be there, but I don't know if you're going to be there, Bobby.
You don't know that. Come on.
Well, hey, I would love to see you there. But look, let me hold on. Let me pull this up real quick. I'm going to go through because the big argument always is with Clemson is they don't play anybody. And I get it. The ACC sucks. We get it. We all know that. But if you go back to 2016, we can see that Clemson played the same schedule they play now, but going into the playoffs, and that year they won the national championship for the first time in 38 years, or whatever it was. But they say they don't play anybody, but all they do is schedule great teams every year. And look, so you've got South Carolina every year. I know it's hit or miss. And there's talk about possibly eliminating South Carolina from their schedule. I'm seeing that on social media. That's not going to happen. It's a state law. It's a state law that Clemson. This is how backwards things are in South Carolina. By the way, when with all the stuff that's going on in politics, we're more worried about what happens in college football than who gets health care or whatever else. But the point is, we are required by state law to play South Carolina every year. We're required by state law to play an FCS team every year. Now, I'm not going to even get into whether or not I feel like the FCS thing is viable or something I like, because it's not. I don't like the FCS teams being scheduled on any major college football program, period. But let me listen to this. And so I was looking at this right before we came on, and this is a fresh thought. So there's no preconceived bias going into this. And there's something I found interesting about the next 17 years of Clemson's non-conference scheduling. So listen to this. 2020, this year, Notre Dame, which I'll be at that game in South Bend, by the way. So anybody who's going there, please hit up Pigskin Pete. If you want to come beat me up or have a beer, either way is fine with me. I don't really care. 2020, Notre Dame. 2021, Georgia. 2022, Notre Dame. 2023, Notre Dame. 2024, Georgia. 2025, LSU. 2026, LSU. 2027, Notre Dame. 2028, Notre Dame. 2029 and 2030, both Georgia. 2031, Notre Dame. 2032, Georgia. 2033, Georgia. 2034, Notre Dame. And then we finally have a icebreaker in there in 2034 and 2035. Or no, sorry, 2035 and 2036, Oklahoma. 2037, Notre Dame. So what do you see here? It's a whole lot of Notre Dame and Georgia over the next 17 years.
Isn't that kind of boring?
It is. And so I'm sitting here like I'm first of all, I'm happy that we're scheduling Georgia on a regular basis now. After all of the years, I think I don't know the number. I think Clemson and Georgia have played each other like 60 something times through our history. It used to be a huge rivalry in the South, especially between the state of South Carolina and Georgia, because we know that the only university that matters in the state is Clemson. South Carolina, they can schedule whoever they want. Nobody really cares. But I'm just going through this, and I'm looking at all these Notre Dame and Georgia, Notre Dame, Georgia, Notre Dame, Georgia. Great. LSU twice, Oklahoma twice in the next 17 years. But outside of that, are we going to get bored of seeing Clemson and Georgia and Clemson and Notre Dame? And this is my problem with forget Georgia for a second. This is my problem with Notre Dame. Oh, well, I have a lot of problems with Notre Dame. But the number one problem I have with looking at this is that all of these games that were scheduled to play Notre Dame are considered non-conference games. That's the number one problem. And the reason is because we all know Notre Dame's an ACC team. They want to sit back and pretend like they're not, but we all know that they are. Do you agree with that? Does anybody agree that they're an ACC team who's lying to us and everybody else?
I think so. I mean, Notre Dame is in the ACC and everything else. I mean, they really are. I mean, it's crazy. They're playing because of their agreement with the ACC and all the other 500 sports that they're part of. They're playing 4 or 5 ACC teams each and every year for the past 2 or 3 years, and it doesn't make sense. I mean, you've had people on your show, both of you have, who's talked about that this is no longer a money issue for Notre Dame, and that they're not going to be losing out on a bunch of money with NBC. That in fact they're actually losing money by not joining the conference and so on. So yeah, it annoys me that Notre Dame just won't go ahead and, I mean, because when you look at, I know I interrupted myself there. I just chased a squirrel. I just had to stop. When you look inside, like all these preseason books and it breaks down all the conferences, then you get to the independents. Who is in the independents that we even respect after Notre Dame? Army, the Red Hat Ladies, the Blind Children of Virginia. I mean, that is who is in the independents. And then you have Notre Dame. It doesn't make sense. I think they should join a conference. Kind of getting back to where we both started off. Hey, I'm glad that we added both those schools, especially Georgia. I mean, Georgia is Athens, Georgia, to Clemson's front door is about an hour and 40 minutes. Now, if you drive like me, you can be there in about an hour and 15. But we should be playing at least every other year. If you talk to any good Clemson fan, any good Georgia fan, we should be playing each other at least every other year. It doesn't make sense. We're so close to each other, so I'm glad that we're playing. The only complaint that I have about us playing Georgia next year is that Trevor Lawrence will be gone, ETN will be gone, Ross will be gone. There'll be some players that, hey, I would love for them to play this year. Let's go ahead and get Akron out of the way, and we'll kick the Zips out of the whole schedule next year. Let's go ahead and bring in Georgia. I would love to play Georgia this year. That's my only complaint. But to know that Georgia and Clemson will be meeting in the future, I'm very happy about that.
Well, first of all, why does it matter who's going to be there and who's not going to be there? I mean, they should play each other on a regular basis, regardless of who's going to be there and who's not going to be there. The other thing is you know as well as I do, Bobby, that these teams have to agree on this ahead of time. The only reason I think this even happened, because most of these games are scheduled, 5-10 years in advance, right? I mean, I just went through 17 years of scheduling, but the reality is that Georgia had to cancel a game with I don't know, Austin P, or I don't even know who the hell it was, San Jose State or something like that. And Clemson had on their schedule for 2021, before this game was scheduled, it was scheduled or planned on being the worst Clemson schedule in the past 50 years. I'm talking the worst, like literally nobody on their schedule other than South Carolina, which, people already say Clemson doesn't schedule anybody. If this game didn't happen, it would have been, they could have went 12-0 and still not made the playoffs. That's how bad it was. But I agree with you. But the thing is, though, is that the ACC, again, I just saw Mark's previous stream, or I caught a couple of minutes of it with the Florida State guys. And Florida State needs to get their shit together. Excuse me, my French.
They do.
They need to get their stuff together. Do you remember the days, and it wasn't that long ago, when Florida State was a powerhouse, when NC State, and I know people are going to say NC State's no good, they were at least respectable. All right, they weren't a powerhouse, but they were respectable. Back when Lamar Jackson was there with Petrino, they were respectable. There was a lot of respectable teams on Clemson's schedule without the non-conference. South Carolina was respectable when Steve Spurrier was there. So there was a lot of things that have happened over the past few years that have changed the perception of Clemson football. And I would like to see it get back to that, to where at least the ACC, they don't have to be the best conference. I don't even care about that. They're not even the best conference in basketball right now, which is pretty sad in itself. It's a whole nother video. But I just want to get back to I want to get back to looking forward to at least 3 or 4 games a year on Clemson's schedule instead of just one.
So I understand your point about Notre Dame being part of the ACC. I think it's a valid argument. I understand it. I don't completely agree with it just because they're not. You have to be part of the conference to qualify for the conference championship, and Notre Dame cannot win the conference. So they're obviously not part of the ACC. I completely get your point. They might as well be part of the ACC. They play 5 games. They're scheduled forever. All the other sports are there. They don't belong to a conference. They need to get in a conference, and this would be the conference that they would be part of if they chose to join a conference, and they need to do that. That's the ACC's problem. The ACC needed to be tougher in negotiations to say, hey, you joined us in everything else. You have to join us here.
Yes. You hit the nail on the head. First of all, I don't fault Notre Dame for this at all. First of all, I don't even have a problem with Notre Dame being independent. If a school wants to be independent and schedule a bunch of teams across the country, as long as it's a decent schedule, which Notre Dame does do, I have no problem with it at all. My problem is with what you just said. The ACC is allowing this to happen. Is there another conference in the country, whether it be the Big 10 or the SEC or the Big 12? I guess the Pac-12 probably wouldn't fit in well with Notre Dame, even though they're right in the middle of the country. So I guess they could go anywhere. But is there another conference in the country that would allow this to happen? Because if you the whole idea behind this is that Notre Dame is capitalizing on being independent financially for the TV contracts and for everything else. Fine. That's great if they feel like they're monetizing off of that. Is there another conference that would allow this to happen? Because they don't split their proceeds with the ACC. Every single win that they have against lower tier ACC teams goes against the ACC team's non-conference record. So when you look at the ACC's non-conference record over the past 3 or 4 years, you can how many of those losses came to Notre Dame?
Except for Notre Dame losing to Clemson a few years ago. What was that? The 2015 season when Clemson went to its first national championship game.
Right.
Other than that, I'm almost positive I could stand
Miami.
I think Notre Dame's gone 5-0 every year.
They lost to Miami a couple of years ago when Miami.
Oh yeah, they lost. Yeah, they got blown out at Miami. Otherwise, they've gone 5-0 every other year.
Right.
In the 1-4-1.
So
that kills. And I will be the first one to admit it when I'm going through the non-conference schedules and making fun of the ACC. That 3-13 or whatever it was is basically 3-8 minus Notre Dame, and Notre Dame would be the second best team in the conference.
Right. And that's just the losses. If you look at the wins that Notre Dame has, those would also be credited to the ACC if they were in the conference.
True.
And the bowl records as well. Well, actually, the bowl records for Notre Dame has been pretty abysmal, so I don't care about that as much. But listen, the bottom line here is that this year Notre Dame's playing 6 ACC teams in 2020. 6.
Wow.
That is 2 less games. Yes, they're playing 6. That is 2 fewer games than Clemson's playing in every other team in the ACC.
They're up to 6 now.
Well, they fluctuate. It averages around 5. So some years it's 4, some it's 5. This year happens to be 6. But the bottom line is that they are a de facto ACC team, other than the title, other than the patch on their jersey, and that's what rubs me the wrong way. And it's not Notre Dame's fault. They are taking advantage of the ACC has bent over and allowed them to do this to them. And that's my biggest problem with it is if I were the commissioner of the ACC or whatever, the president or whatever the hell it is, I would be telling Notre Dame to take a hike, because what is Notre Dame really doing other than maybe some ticket sales for your home game if you're an ACC team? But if you look at Notre Dame's schedule this year, every ACC team they play, except for 1 out of those 6, is at a neutral site. Every one of them, if they're not home. They're all playing in pro stadiums. They're playing in Charlotte. They're playing in Yankee Stadium. They're playing in Ireland. Hell, they're playing in. I wouldn't be surprised if they played in Japan next. The bottom line is they're only playing one true away game in the ACC this year. One. Go ahead, look it up, Mark. I know I can see. I can see. I can see the
look. I do remember that they did schedule Boston College early in the season, maybe the first game of the season, and that's in Ireland. So the Wake Forest game, are they playing Wake Forest? Is that the time that they play in Charlotte?
No, yeah, they play Wake Forest and Charlotte. The Ireland game is actually Navy, not
Navy,
not Boston College.
They've played Boston College in the past.
I don't have it in front of me, but I do know that there's out of all the ACC road games they play, only one of them is an actual true road game. One of them. I can see you looking it up now.
I've got it right here. So we've got Notre Dame against Wake. Well, I don't have locations here.
That's in Charlotte.
Okay, they've got Wake on September 25th. They've got at Pitt. They play Duke.
Well, Pitt plays it in a pro stadium anyway, so that might be the one.
They play Duke. They play. They must play them at home.
Yes, they do.
They host Clemson.
Right.
They go to Georgia Tech.
That's in Atlanta.
Are they playing at the Pro Stadium though?
Yes.
Or are they playing at
no?
Georgia Tech?
No. That's in Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then
they're playing. They're also playing Wisconsin and Green Bay in Lambeau.
Lambeau.
Yeah.
Pigskin, we should have had you on our Notre Dame live stream.
Yeah, maybe you should have. I don't know, but I do know that John, always Irish, is a good buddy of mine. He's going to be showing me around South Bend whenever I go up there in November. So looking forward to that.
Once we get the budget to a certain level, Pigskin and Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, travels around the country and does kind of a semi-college game day. Then, if that happens in a hurry here, like in the next 6 or 7 months, then maybe I'll see you in South Bend.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. But Bobby, are you coming?
If my internet connection will allow me to show up.
So we can buy some plane tickets.
Yeah, I won't tell you who my internet provider is. This is not a good showing for them.
You must have T-Mobile, same person I have.
I would like to see you guys mix it up a little bit. And the one thing that, again, I was only somewhat kidding when I called this the perfect program, because I don't know what they could be doing any better. Of course, nothing's perfect, but I don't know what they could be doing much better than what they're doing right now. Is there any reason to believe that this train is going to come off the rails? And I don't mean that they're going to win 5 games in a couple of years, but drop from that elite status to back to what they were, winning 8 and 9 games most seasons 10 or 15 years ago.
God,
not anytime soon,
man.
Brian, I can hear you.
We got Brian.
There he goes. Listen. If you look at the incoming class this year, Brian Brzee, #1 overall recruit in the country, defensive tackle out of Maryland. Miles Murphy, defensive end out of Georgia. DJ Uiagalelei. Hold on, let me.
You're going to have time to work on that during the off season.
Listen, I just perfected it. Uiagalelei. I heard him say it. That's how I know it's correct, because he said himself it was Uiagalelei. So everyone write that down, and I'm sure Bobby will be able to pronounce that by 2025 if he really tries. Trenton Simpson, linebacker out of North Carolina. DeMonte Capehart, Fred Davis, cornerback. EJ Williams, Mitchell Mays, Demarcus Bowman, the running back out of Florida, who, by the way, was the #1 player in the state of Florida in all of high school football last year. He was named Mr. Football of the state of Florida. So if you're a Florida State fan, if you're a Miami fan, if you're an FAU fan, FIU, whatever fan, the #1 player out of the entire state came to Clemson. And that's scary if you look at DeMarcus Bowman. And we obviously have Lynn J. Dixon coming back and Travis Etienne. at running back. So Clemson is quickly becoming a university that's known for running back talent, which we haven't been in the past, with the exception of, a player here and there, C.J. Spiller, Davis, guys like that. Of course, Wayne Gallman, Andre Ellington, those guys. But there's never been a deep running back class. We've always had one guy who's the main running back and then a bunch of other guys. But right now we have 3 NFL running backs on our roster, an NFL quarterback, 3 or 4 NFL wide receivers. This next year on offense is quite possibly going to be better than it was last year. And the funny thing is that coming into last season, people thought that Clemson's offense was going to be taking a step back. And even 3 or 4 games into the season, there's people saying, "Oh yeah, well, you don't have the offense you had last year." When they beat Alabama in the title game. The reality is they had more yards per game, more points per game. I mean, every metric that you could look at, all the way up until they played LSU, was better than it was a year before when they won the championship. This team this year, coming into 2020, on paper, and it's just on paper, but should be better than it was the previous 2 seasons, which should scare a lot of people.
Before we let Brian talk, I want to put a cap on the schedule discussion, because you kind of touched on this, Pigskin, but I just want to clarify for everybody out there that we're only about 5 seasons removed from South Carolina winning 11 games, 3 consecutive seasons, and finishing in the top 5 in the nation under Steve Spurrier.
Uh-huh.
Will Muschamp is no Steve Spurrier, but he's a capable coach, and maybe he keeps his job, maybe he doesn't, and maybe we're sitting here 5 years from now, and in addition to playing Notre Dame and Georgia every year, they're playing a South Carolina team that I would not expect to reach the ranks of the top 5 in the nation on a regular basis, but maybe what their facilities and recruiting footprint and all the resources they have as an SEC somewhat top tier team or middle tier team should be. And that's going 8-4 and being a respectable team that is not a joke on the schedule. And maybe they become that. And then that non-conference schedule is really brutal.
I'll let you handle that, Brian. Go ahead. Is he there?
He's locked up. He looks like he's focused is what he is.
He does look focused.
He looks focused.
So I'll answer that, I guess. There's nobody out there that would love to see South Carolina be at least relevant more than me. You just mentioned the 3-11 win seasons that Spurrier had, and we all know that's the best accomplishment that South Carolina's had in 120 years is those 3-11 win seasons. And listen, they have that. They have the 5 wins over Clemson in a row.
They still didn't win the conference, but
they didn't win the conference. They only won the division, I think, 1 time throughout that.
And that was actually before that. That was in 2010 when they lost 5 games, but they played Cam Newton in the conference championship game and got annihilated.
Right, exactly. So the notion that Will Muschamp is a capable coach, which is I think is what you just said, is arguable. I mean, listen, you're talking to a South Carolina hater. I realize that, but I also pay attention to what's going on. What Will Muschamp did at Florida was not really that impressive. He had his entire tenure there, I think, was like a 500 record. He had 111 win season there, and the other 2 were not great, which is why he got fired. And we're seeing sort of the same trend happen at South Carolina. The recruiting there is not great either, but if you look at what his recruiting compared to years past, I guess you could say it's good. It's not terrible. I mean, he's in the top 20. But if you're a South Carolina team, you're competing against Clemson and Georgia every year on your schedule, without a doubt. Top 18, top 19 is not really going to cut the mustard in the grand scheme of things. They did get Jordan Birch, which was the biggest sort of joke of the recruiting cycle. Kind of an embarrassment, really. I mean, listen, they got him, and he's a Columbia kid, and he's a great player, and I wish the kid all the luck. I'm sure he's a great kid. I'm not going to hate on him, but the bottom line is, like, that was sort of a faux pas, wasn't it? I mean, kind of embarrassing for them to have to go through that all the way up until signing day, and even 2 days after, for him to actually commit there. And look, as far as South Carolina goes, I don't see a situation, especially since I'm not sold on their quarterback situation, in the next 2 or 3 years where they are competing either for the East in the SEC or certainly not against their in-state rival Clemson. So an 8 or 9 win season, I think, would be a big time plus for them. Anything outside of that, I don't see happening. Listen, there's no 10 win seasons coming in the next 2 or 3 years. And at this point, they just need to get outside of, on the plus side of things and make a bowl game.
It speaks volumes that we've been on here for, let's see, we've been on here for over a half hour. And most of the Clemson discussion has focused on, can South Carolina get their act together to become an actual opponent on the schedule? And why doesn't Notre Dame join the ACC? Why can't we get them roped into the ACC to make it more respectable in the ACC? Not that they're going to compete with Clemson, as we saw the last time the two teams were on the field, but they have the best chance of doing so. We're talking more what's surrounding Clemson than, because any other team live stream that I would have on here, we'd be talking about even the Ohio States and Alabamas, what's going on in 2020 and can they maintain it against their conference? But man, it's just such a foregone conclusion that Clemson's going to win the ACC. And I point at, and you've already done it, Florida State, number 1, Miami, number 2, as being the two teams, the two programs, because of where they're located, that need to get their act together because they're the two biggest threats long-term.
Yeah, I see on the screen there, Cheryl is saying she's here for Mark. That's great, Cheryl. You should be. I'm here for Mark too. But thank you for the love. I'm assuming you're saying you're not here for me.
I have to keep that up an extra long time. Cheryl's a great supporter to the channel. Yes,
I know.
She is.
Listen, Cheryl's great. I know Cheryl. She's all over the place. But or he. I don't even know if it's a he or she. But I'm not judging. Yeah. So as far as the FPI is concerned, Clemson is, and I don't know if you saw this today, Mark. Clemson is number 1 in the FPI. I think Ohio State's number 2. Alabama was 3, I think. The shocking thing was to see that Georgia, I think, was like at number 10 or something. They were way down the list. But yeah, so there's no shock that Clemson is, predicted to win the ACC. I don't think anybody is surprised by that. The fact that people are surprised, if there is anybody that's surprised, to think that Clemson could compete with the Ohio States or the Alabamas in the postseason, that's a little bit shocking to me. That just shows me who actually pays attention to college football and who doesn't. When Clemson's been recruiting somewhere around 9, 10, 11 on a regular basis throughout the past 5, 10 years. And this year they're in the top 3, depending on which outlet you look at. To think that they're not going to be in the mix and competing with these teams again would be ridiculous. But again, you mentioned Florida State and some of these other teams in the ACC. They've got to get their stuff together. Listen, again, I'm right there with you. I'm right there with all the people that say Clemson doesn't play anybody. They're doing the best they can to play somebody as far as their non-conference scheduling. But it's up to some of these teams in the ACC, whether it's Louisville or NC State or Florida State or whoever, to get their act together and make it interesting for Clemson, because it's not right now.
Yeah, when you already play South Carolina, and again, we're not selling them as a great program, but they've been respectable for the most part in the past. A lot of teams, a lot of programs would say, there's our game, there's our Power 5, then we'll schedule the 3 FCS group of 5 games and we're good to go. But Clemson, holding itself to a higher standard, which they should, goes out there and schedules again a lot of Georgia, and then the ACC scheduling for them Notre Dame, and this could turn out to be, and if the ACC gets its act together, which I don't believe that the conference is going to be this bad for long. I just think that
they can't get much worse.
There's too much. Well, yeah. And I've been saying that for 2 years, and ACC fans think I hate the conference because of it. I'm just telling the truth. There's too many good football players down there in the South. That's just, they got to keep those guys at home with some competent coaching, develop some programs. and get it done. So we'll see what Mike Bell. He's the most important guy in the conference right this second.
And Manny Diaz too with Miami. And I know Miami's never won the ACC, and well, even though they haven't won the ACC, at least there was a point. I'd say the early 2000s, maybe from 2000. When did they join the conference? 2001, something like that.
It was a little bit later
2005, maybe.
Yeah,
somewhere around
04, 05, something in that range.
So there's a like a 6 or 7 year period there, 5, 6, 7 years where they were at least competitive and they were at least a respectable team. And hell, as recent as 3 years ago, whenever they were, 11-1 going into the ACC championship, they were respectable then. So that was their shining moment. But Miami's got to get back in there too. At Florida State, Miami, I feel like that Virginia Tech is another huge crutch for the ACC as far as being respectable. And I think that, I don't know. We'll see what happens. Bud Foster's leaving this year, or he's gone now, obviously. And so we'll see how they are able to rebound from that. But and there was a whole debacle with Fuente. Where's he going to go to Baylor? He interviewed and some guys left. And then there was a whole discussion about him coming out saying that people that enter the transfer portal are not allowed to re-enroll if they don't find a place to land, and all of that controversy. So Virginia Tech is somewhat of a mess right now as well. I don't know how much longer Fuente is going to be there, honestly, if he doesn't compete in that division. But Louisville, NC State, Florida State, Miami, these teams have to be at least relevant. I'm not saying they have to be top 10 or even top 15 teams year in, year out, but they've got to be relevant for the ACC to be respected again.
Jay Jobs, usually a supporter, but he's tagging me for that Will Muschamp comment as well. And I understand why.
Yeah.
I still would put him in the capable category.
I think I saw Uncle Lou here a minute ago. He said something about sunglasses, which is ironic. But everybody knows, and from the words of the great Uncle Lou, everybody knows Will Muschamp works for UGA.
Yeah, that's the way it's worked out for him. So we'll see if South Carolina tolerates 4-win seasons for much longer. But we pretty much saw that coming with that schedule. You talk about a schedule. They had it lined up in such a way that that's was not a big shock to anyone. All right, and then you've got Virginia Tech should be a decent program. North Carolina, which of course I think they're the most interesting team in 2020 in the ACC. They could win the division.
Who?
North Carolina. You've got
oh yes,
the wide receivers are all back. The 2 running backs, Sam Howell at quarterback. I've looked at the defense. I posted a video a few weeks when I looked through the personnel. They've got most of it coming back.
I agree. North Carolina is the fly in the ointment in the Coastal Division. If you're a Miami fan, you should be very worried about this. And if you just look at the Coastal Division in itself, who's going to win that conference or that division? You got North Carolina, who I think is the front runner, honestly, in the offseason. Miami's the unknown. And then you have Virginia and Virginia Tech. I'd say out of all 4 of those teams, I would honestly put North Carolina and Virginia both ahead of Miami. And for a reason you just said. First of all, there's no more returning starters on any team in that division than North Carolina. They're going to have a senior-laden team. They're going to have the second best quarterback probably in the conference outside of Trevor Lawrence. I think Sam Howell is probably the second best quarterback in that conference. Now you could say Derek King coming over from Houston. Well, we don't know if that's true or not. That's a huge unknown. I think he's probably, right there as far as talent goes with Howell and even Lawrence. But what we don't know about the coaching. The one thing about North Carolina we do know is they have great coaching, right? We don't know that yet about Miami. They're going through a coaching carousel, both as far as the head coach goes. I mean, I know we're going into the second year with Diaz, but the coordinators are recycling. The skill players, I'm not sure about yet. So I think that out of all these teams in the Coastal Division, North Carolina has the most continuity right now, and they have the most stable coaching staff. And I think Howell is going to be amazing. I think Howell is going to end up being probably a first-round pick when he comes out. And he's only going to be a true sophomore this year. But this he's really good, really good. So I think that, Virginia is another team that we don't really know a whole lot about as far as what they're going to do this year. Obviously, Bronco Mendenhall is doing great things there, and he's built that program up from where they've been for the past 20 years or so. But I agree with you. I think that North Carolina should be the favorite to win the Coastal going into the season.
Yeah, Sam Howell, right out of the gate, a big-time game, pro stadium, nationally televised game against South Carolina. True freshman, first game. He's down by 2 scores in the fourth quarter. He delivers a comeback for a win against South Carolina. First ACC game, he's got a 4th and 15 he's facing, or 4th and 19, something crazy like that. He delivers. They score the game-winning touchdown against Miami, and on and on and on. 38 touchdowns, 7 picks. And, Michael Carter, 1,000 yards. Almost 6 yards per carry, and Javonte Williams almost 1,000 yards, 5.6 per carry, both back in the backfield. And their top 3 receivers in Daz Newsome, 72 catches, 10 touchdowns. De'Ame Brown, 51 catches, 12 touchdowns. Bo Corrales, 40 catches. All those guys are freak athletes. They're all back. I did my research on the offensive line. They lose their all-ACC center. The other 4 offensive linemen are back, and most of their defensive playmakers, the guys that got the sacks, the tackles for losses, are back.
So, Mark,
this will be a fun team.
Do you have their schedule pulled up?
Yeah. Well, I know off the top of my head they've got UCF and Auburn.
Oh, so
those are going to be interesting games.
So is Auburn an early game?
Yeah, I think it's a neutral site. I'll pull it up here in a second.
That must be week 1.
I think it's an Atlanta game.
Week 1 or 2, probably.
Yeah, I think it's a week 1 in Atlanta, I think, and they play UCF.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's good stuff cool. There. That's the kind of stuff I like to see. Is them playing Auburn obviously is awesome, and then playing UCF as well, because UCF has been running around for the past 2 or 3 years saying that nobody wants to play them, so they scheduled a nobody in North Carolina. Well, I can't wait to watch North Carolina beat the brakes off of them. And make them look like fools, because every time we hear this thing about the American Athletic Conference is better than the ACC. Well, we see what happens when the top teams play the ACC. We saw UCF got beat by Pitt last year, and I would not be surprised. Just okay, I can see the look on your face right now.
See the wheels turning.
So, Mark, I respect your opinion. I do, or I wouldn't be here. And I know of all people,
as I do yours, that doesn't mean we don't disagree.
I know of all people, I know that you look at schedule.
Yep.
And you say, and you've been critical of Clemson's schedule, and not because of Clemson's
not
fault,
because of them,
because of them, but because of the teams that are on the schedule. The ACC is terrible. But in that same line of thought that you have, that logical thought that I know you have, you could sit there and look at an American athletic schedule when they play 3 Power 5 teams a year, and you can tell me that you think that team, that conference, could compare to the ACC.
Okay, it first and foremost doesn't compare just because of the team at the top, because any comparison that has to
I'm
be
not talking
made
about the top. I'm talking about the entire conference.
I know, but that's a big distinction, to have an elite, best program in the country, arguably best team, one of the top 3 teams.
Forget Clemson. I'm talking about the rest of the team.
But if you take off Clemson, not overall, nor do I expect it to last. But if we took the American Conference in 2019 versus the ACC minus Clemson,
so tell me which teams in the American Athletic Conference would get better than a 6-6 season playing a full ACC schedule.
Okay, let me pull up the American, because the first thing you would need to do would be, you got 14 teams in each conference. I would love, you've actually got 12 teams in the American Conference, but I would love to see them listed out. You give me your 1 through 14 in the ACC, and I give you my 1 through 12 in the American, and we just match them off and say, who wins this game? But I got to tell you,
Well, I'll give you my top 14 in the ACC right now. Ready?
okay.
Clemson and the 13 others are tied for the second spot.
Well, see, that's your problem right there because we were going to do this without Clemson.
All right.
So
All
you
right,
don't get your Clemson. So you got to figure out who the second best team in the ACC is, and that's kind of tough. I guess it's Virginia, 2019 Virginia.
Well, yeah, I can't argue with
Virginia versus Memphis. You don't think that's a toss-up?
I'm talking about okay. All right. Okay. A toss-up. Virginia, Memphis. Even though
who's your second team? Wake, North Carolina.
I guess after that you'd have to go. 2019 is so bad. I guess you'd have to go North Carolina.
Well, that's what I'm saying. 2019.
All right. I guess I
expect the American Conference. To
I'm playing along here. Let's go. This is great.
Who's your second team? North Carolina.
North Carolina.
They're going to play Cincinnati.
Why? What's that face for? So North Carolina can take Clemson down to the last play, but they can't beat Cincinnati?
Well, come on. North Carolina also lost to Appalachian State. We can't take one game as an example for everybody.
So how many non-Power 5 teams did Cincinnati lose to? At least one.
Well, they lost to Ohio State.
I said non-Power 5 team.
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, they lost to Memphis twice.
That was it, huh?
Cincinnati beat
UCLA, I think.
Yeah, but I'm trying to think who they beat in their bowl game. I'm losing it. So I'm going to I'm going to give you an argument. I'm going to give you a point here. This is going to make an easy point for you, but I'm going to make it for you and against me. Is that Temple and North Carolina played in a bowl game?
And who won that?
And North Carolina just beat the brakes off.
All right, so Cincinnati was a really good team last year.
Yeah.
All right, so what about the other 11 teams?
So let's go to our number 3. Who are you going to go with?
In the ACC?
In the ACC. Is it Pitt, Wake?
I think I'm going to go with, unfortunately, and this just shows how bad the ACC was last year. If they're the third best team, it's probably Miami.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Last year's Miami
I think Miami was better than Wake in the grand scheme of things, yeah.
Okay, Miami's going to play UCF. I'm going 3 deep, and I'm still at UCF, who was 10-3.
And got beat by Pitt.
They got beat by Pitt on the last play of the game, and Pitt wasn't awful.
Wait. They got beat by Pitt, right?
Yeah, on the last play of the game.
They got beat by Pitt.
Well, it's different losing to a team 52-0 and losing 38-35. You got to admit,
listen,
Pete, we're having a different discussion.
Here's my point, is that the argument I'm hearing is that teams like UCF and Cincinnati could run through the ACC and they'd be 10-2.
No. I never made that argument.
I didn't say you did. I'm saying that's what I'm seeing online. And you listen, you've heard this argument too. Don't act like I'm the first one that's ever brought this up.
Oh, I have. I've had people come on here and say, Mark, I want you to compare. They want me to shoot videos and go American Conference ACC. I'm saying that Memphis, Cincinnati, UCF could go into the ACC, not every year, year after year after year, in 2019 and do something similar to what North Carolina, Louisville, Wake did and go like 5-3.
I don't agree with that.
In the ACC.
I don't agree with that.
You don't think Memphis could go 5-3 in the ACC? That Memphis team.
I don't. It's one thing to.
They played Penn State down to the last 5 minutes. Penn State was a legit top 10 team in the nation.
Pull up UCF schedule, Memphis schedule, UCF, all of them. Pull up their schedules and then tell me that they have anything that compares to what the ACC teams play every year.
Well, it's kind of a mute argument because the argument we're making is the ACC and the American Conference, and I'm going to pull up the American Conference schedule and they're going to be playing the American Conference.
Right.
And that's what we're arguing. So you're going to say so-and-so is no good and so-and-so is no good and so-and-so is no good. And I'm going to say, well, they're pretty good. They're pretty good. They all played each other.
Look, we all know that the reason that they're not in a Power 5 conference, and I'm not saying there's not a good group of 5 conferences, because there are, or good teams. But the reason these players weren't recruited or didn't make a roster on a Power 5 team. Look, this is the same argument when people say, oh, the Alabama or Clemson could beat the Browns, right?
Is
No.
Rutgers better than Memphis? Rutgers is a Power 5 team. Kansas
right.
is a Power 5 team.
I don't know. I think
They're awful.
Honestly, I think that if you put Rutgers in the American Athletic Conference, I think they would have a much better record than they would in the Big Ten.
Well, sure.
Okay, then.
But you're comparing different Power 5 conferences.
Listen, you could put Rutgers. So let me ask you this. If you put Rutgers in the ACC, what would their record be?
They were so bad last year, though, that their record may not be much better or any better, but they're not losing like 58-0 every week. They get the last 2 or 3 Rutgers teams were so bad, everybody was beating them just down to nothing, to dirt. They've gone 0-9 in the Big Ten the last 2 years, and none of the games are close.
So when TCU was in the group of 5,
yes,
they were dominating those last couple of years they were in there.
Yep.
What happened when they joined the Big 12? What did those first 2 seasons look like?
The first couple seasons were pretty ugly, as was it for Utah when they joined the Pac-12.
That's my point.
I am not claiming that Cincinnati and Memphis are going to go into the ACC and dominate. I'm saying they're going to go like 4 or 5-3.
I can agree with that. But listen, my argument here is that people think that the American Athletic Conference is better than the ACC.
No.
Okay.
And for me to even have this conversation, we had to take out the best team in the ACC. If we put Clemson back in, I'm not having the conversation.
Yeah, and we also wouldn't be having this conversation if it was, say, 2 or 3 years ago, because there was 3 top 15 teams in the ACC annually.
Yes, and for all the people out there that think I hate the ACC, I was making the statements after the 2016 season, not necessarily that the ACC was the best conference, but I said it was arguably the best conference, and then it played better against all the other conferences than any other conference, including the SEC, that particular season. So I will give props to the ACC, just like I will every other conference or any other team when they earn it.
I agree. So I think we're actually agreeing here. We're arguing, but
generally, I think we're just slightly disagreeing. I think you're giving, I'm giving the ACC or the American Conference a little bit more credit than you, but not a whole lot.
No, I think that the American Athletic Conference, there's 2 or 3 teams in that conference that are elite. But if you even take those 3 elite teams and put them in any Power 5 conference, you're not winning 10, 11 games a year. That's my only point.
No, absolutely not. A case in point, and I'm going to make another point for you. Do you know what team surprised me when the first college football playoff rankings were unveiled? Because this team was completely off my radar. I hadn't paid attention to them the entire season. So I'm sitting there watching the college football playoff rankings get unveiled, and everybody's obviously focused on the top 5 or 10. And I see Navy at like 23, and I go, they're not in my rankings. I haven't even considered them for my rankings. And I go to their schedule, Pigskin Pete, and they're like 7-1 at the time. And they hadn't beaten like anybody with a pulse. And they lost to somebody in their conference that was really not that good, like a Temple. I'll have to look it up. And then it was only like a week or 2 later, they played Notre Dame. And they were losing 49-7 in the 4th quarter. And so after they lost that game, the College Football Playoff Selection Committee knocked them out of the top 25. But all they had to do is beat another like 1 or 2 bad teams again, and they put them back in the top 25. Now, let's separate what those guys do off the field, because I've got the utmost respect for what they do off the field. That has nothing to do with the football analysis. Mm-hmm. They're amazing people that have much more important things to do off the field. But as a football team, they were not one of the 25 best teams in the country. It wasn't even close.
You know, listen, we can go down the rabbit hole of how they rank these teams in the playoff committee or even the AP poll as far as where they're ranked. Because if you even we're talking about the ACC, I think that there was 2 or 3 teams probably that were worthy of being in the top 25 at the end of the season last year. And there was a bunch of, again, we go back to the group of 5, a bunch of group of 5 teams in the top 25. And you had what? Clemson and no ACC teams. Maybe Virginia sneaked in there at the end of the last ranking or whatever it was. But that's my point. And my point is like first of all, these rankings are clearly biased, right? Because if you have three or four group of 5 teams in the top 25, and you only have one ACC team in there when the schedules clearly aren't, equal. When you have 3 or 4 teams in there that haven't played, but with two or maybe even 3 at the most Power 5 teams on their entire schedule, and lost to most of them. I mean, some of those guys beat their Power 5 teams they played. Like you said, Cincinnati they lost to Ohio State, but they beat, I think, UCLA, and of course Boise State, beat Florida State, a terrible Florida State team. But you see my point here is it's not the way that they rank these teams. I'm not completely on board with. There is definitely some shenanigans going on in the way they rank these teams and some bias.
I totally agree with you, even though I will argue that the group of 5 is treated unfairly in regards to an impartial system in which they are given a seat at the table. They're not that good. So I got a guy who comes on here that loves the group of 5 and always wants me to preview group of 5 games. And I love group of 5 football. If it's a Thursday or Friday night, I'm going to watch them, but I'm not going to watch them on Saturday. But here's the point, and you will, and I'm backing up your point here, is that after the season, I ranked the teams 1 through 130. And that was an exhaustive process. And I tried to take it seriously and do a decent job. But, you could analyze that to death, obviously. So I'm ranking the teams 1 through 130. And I had a few people criticize me. They said, you're not giving the group of 5 enough respect. You've got them ranked too low, because I had teams like Navy and teams like that, SMU, that were on the brink of the top 25, or Navy finished in the top 25. I had them like 28, 32, something in that range.
Right.
And they were like arguing with me. I gave a list of games, tons of examples of why the Power 5 is substantially better than the group of 5. For example, this is just one of a zillion games I could give. Washington. What do we think of Washington football in 2019?
Yeah, they're bad.
They were not good.
Right.
They lost to some marginal teams. They finished 7-5. They played Boise State, who was that close to displacing Memphis as being the team that got the New Year's 6 bid.
And they blew them out.
38-7.
Yeah.
A Washington team that went 4-5 in the Pac-12, not the SEC, the Pac-12, and they go out there and beat Boise State by 31 points. And for anybody who says, Mark, that's one game, no, I stacked up like 18 or 20 games like it to say, no, the Power 5 is substantially better than the group of 5.
Yeah, exactly. And you know what the thing is that anytime you have this argument, and not with you, because you know football, obviously, but if you have this argument with anybody who's, a casual fan or maybe just somebody who's a alumni or somebody of a group of 5 team or something, they'll go, well, what about UCF in 2017? Or what year was that? 2017.
Yes.
Oh, they beat Auburn and then in the bowl game, and they went 12-0 or they went 13-0. What about them? All right, so you have one outlying team one year. Like, let's look at a bigger group, a bigger body of work over these teams. And I'm not saying some of these group of 5 teams from year in, year out are not great. Like, listen, Cincinnati last year, they might have went in any Power 5 conference. They might have, done what they did. Maybe they would have, but we won't know that, if they don't play those teams week in and week out. So
you do remember what the Cincinnati score was against Ohio State?
Well, that was like
42-0.
Yeah, it was a blowout. Yeah, exactly. See, there's my point.
So Cincinnati was the second or third best group of 5 team. They were the only team, they played Memphis down to the wire. Memphis was the group of 5 team. So Cincinnati was probably number 2.
Right.
And they lost 42-0.
Yeah. And listen, this is the same thing we hear about Clemson all the time, right? Well, they don't play these tough teams week in, week out. Well, yeah, that's true. In the past couple of years, they're not playing world beaters week in, week out, but they're still playing Power 5 teams. That's the difference. You see what I'm saying? So they say, well, I just saw somebody in the chat here say, Clemson schedules a Citadel, or Clemson schedules a Wofford, or whatever, one game a year.
Everyone does.
Yes, exactly. Everybody schedules cupcakes. At least Clemson's going out of their way to schedule big boys non-conference, and then whoever else in the ACC happens to be good that year, they can't control that. So
All right. As Tiger Nation reminds everyone, and I appreciate you doing so, hit that like button. Y'all support the channel. Do the same over at Pigskin Pete's YouTube channel. If you have yet to do so, please get over there and do that. This is the first time we've mixed it up, talking Clemson football for a full hour with your comments coming in. If you've got anything that you would like us to address at a future date, certainly take your comment, copy and paste it. Head on over to Pigskin's channel.
Can we all
comment right there?
Can we all give
it in the comment section of any of my videos as well?
Can we all give an RIP and a much heartfelt solace to Brian Knight, Bobby Durkins? Cheers, Brian. Internet problems.
There we go. Yes, that's too bad. It's too bad that we missed out on Brian. He got a few comments in before it just gave up on him. The bed. All right, Pigskin, we appreciate you stopping by. And again, everybody, track this guy on Twitter. Get on over to his YouTube channel. Check out the videos and subscribe over there. We appreciate the conversation each and every time. Thanks, man.
Thank you.